President of International Society of Peritoneal Dialysis and is the head of nephrology at Yale New Haven Hospital. He is going to give us an update on the end-stage renal disease initiatives taken by the ISM.
It's really fabulous. So I'm going to talk to you about this ISN End-Stage Kidney Disease Summit, for which there was a meeting in Georgia in 2018, followed a meeting in Melbourne, and this process is still going on, and the thinking about this is evolving. So this was organized by David Harris, who was the past president of the ISN, who did a job, and helped coordinate. We developed a strategy to look at the problem of end-stage kidney disease around the world, and how the ISN can be helpful in supporting national approaches to the management of end-stage kidney disease. So the reason for that is shown here. It's estimated worldwide about 900 million patients have chronic kidney disease. Of these, about 18 million should develop end-stage kidney disease, but only 2.6 million are actually getting treated for end-stage kidney disease around the world. That means that less than 15% of patients with end-stage kidney disease are being treated, and 85% of the patients are dying. That's really the issue, and that's the stimulus for this summit meeting. So 8 themes were developed, which is shown here in this slide, and we'll run through each of these 8 themes and show you what the thinking was and where we're headed in terms of the approach to end-stage kidney disease. So let's go through them one by one. So one is data collection, and here the key was to understand the reasons for the global differences in the incidence and prevalence of end-stage kidney disease and chosen modality of ESRD therapy. So this slide shows the geographic variation in the incidence of treated end-stage kidney disease expressed per million population. And I'll show you exact numbers of this, but it's sort of interesting to look at the highest numbers in the world in the United States, Taiwan, Japan, and Singapore, for example, much lower incidence obviously in Africa and in Asia. And there's really a tremendous variability even inside Europe, which is shown on the lower left-hand panel here. And that, to me, remains one of the mysteries that really needs further explanation, is varying incidence, even in high-income countries. And I'll talk about it more in a minute. So this shows what the prevalent rates are per million population of treated end-stage kidney disease from high-income countries, upper middle-income countries, low-middle-income countries, and low-income countries. And obviously, the numbers drop off as you go down from high-income to low-income countries. But what's particularly striking is a real drop in PD, which drops to 0 when you get to low-income countries, and the marked drop in transplantation. And the reason this is so important is that transplant is clearly the best treatment and the cheapest treatment for end-stage kidney disease. The next cheapest is PD, and the simplest would be PD, but yet these numbers drop off dramatically as the income rate of countries really drops. And that is a huge problem that the ISN is really trying to address, and we're hoping the WHO gets involved in that as well. So again, looking at the exact numbers that I showed this slide earlier, this shows the incidence rate for end-stage kidney disease per million population. But this is not dialysis now, this includes transplantation. And you see these tremendous variations that occur, even amongst high-income countries. And again, to me, this is just fascinating. The US is twice the rates of Canada, 3 times the rate of the UK and Australia, for example. And then as the income level of the country goes down, the treated patients drops dramatically as well. Russia always remains an interesting number to me, as the numbers are really very low in Russia. And this shows the prevalent rates of end-stage kidney disease. And again, there's tremendous variation amongst countries. What's important about this, no matter what economic level of the country you look at, the prevalent rates are increasing around the world. And I'm sure that's happening here in Pakistan as well. Governments are really trying to support end-stage kidney disease therapy as well as they can. Even in countries where the government does not support that, such as Nigeria, as an example, there's been an expansion of dialysis unit and an expansion of the number of patients being treated. This is a huge problem. The population is increasing, the number of people with end-stage renal disease is increasing. This is what the projections are for the end-stage renal disease incidence and prevalence in the United States, projecting through 2030. And no matter which of these curves you follow, so let's look at the top one, which is the prevalence, The curves widen out because of the uncertainty, but no matter which curve you follow, the numbers are going to be increasing dramatically for both incidence and prevalent rates. And this is going to be true everywhere you look in the world. And what's particularly striking about this shows the incident rates for end-stage renal disease by age group in the United States per million population. And again, in older people, the incident rates for end-stage renal disease is incredibly high. This emphasizes the importance of looking at conservative care measures for patients, elderly patients. What is the value of dialysis? What is the value of transplantation in this elderly population? And this was discussed very nicely in 2 talks that were given yesterday. That is an issue that really needs to be thought about and addressed by the government and policy planners and healthcare providers in these countries. And to show you why this is so important, this is where we are in 2019. This is a projection for the elderly population of the United States, the population over age 65 and over age 85. We're almost at an inflection point now where the numbers are increasing dramatically. Develop strategies to dealing with the elderly population is absolutely critically important. So this shows the prevalent rates for dialysis now, not excluding transplantation. And I've shown here, if you look at the numbers on the left-hand panel, what I showed you before for end-stage kidney disease and dialysis. This variation reflects the varying transplant rates in different countries. And this is really a critically important number. So look at the tremendous variation in transplant rates, which I will show you in the next slide now, around the world. This is again expressed per million population. So the countries with the highest prevalence rates, such as Japan and Taiwan, have extremely low transplant rates, whereas countries like the US, which is shown here, or the UK, have much higher transplant rates. Remember, transplantation is the cheapest and the most effective way to treat patients with end-stage kidney disease. Developing effective transplant programs is absolutely essential, and expanding them really as much as you can. But this gives you an idea of what the numbers should be like per million population and what achievable goals are. To do this, though, you need both living-related donor transplants and deceased donor transplants. I guess there are no deceased donor transplants in Pakistan now, right? So developing the legislation to support such a program is really essential. We're dealing with an older population, an increasing incidence of end-stage kidney disease. This is really a crucial thing that really needs to be developed. Now, one explanation for the varying rates, which you see in end-stage kidney disease, are really summarized in this slide very nicely. So the countries in red are the US, Japan, Taiwan, and Singapore. And the countries in blue are other European countries in Australia and New Zealand. And this shows the prevalence of renal replacement therapy by age. And you see there's tremendous splits that occur once you get over the age of 60. And this is probably the major explanation for the varying incidence and prevalent rates in the high-income countries. The approach to patients who are elderly. It is absolutely essential that this be addressed as the population is aging. And I guess the 2 talks yesterday dealing with this were really terrific and something that really needs to be thought about. So, the distribution of therapy is shown here, and I showed this in my talk earlier this morning. I won't go over this in detail, just to show you briefly again that hemodialysis is far and away the most widely used treatment. PD utilization varies widely, and in fact, you can get 80% of the patients with end-stage kidney disease requiring dialysis on PD, and that's the experience in Hong Kong, the experience in Thailand, and the experience in Mexico, as we discussed earlier this morning. But again, PD therapy really should be cheaper, and that's one of the themes of the ISN summit. I'll mention that in just a minute. So the second theme was advocacy, developing an approach to advocate for integrated end-stage kidney disease care, particularly in low and middle-income countries. And this requires a prioritization of publicly funded preventive care and rational coordination of end-stage kidney disease care. So this summarizes an approach, the way we should think about the approach. First, you need to identify patients with chronic kidney disease, and then try to prevent the development of chronic kidney disease. Look at risk factors for chronic kidney disease and try to prevent it. And there's this fabulous data coming out now, I think, which is changing the whole landscape of end-stage kidney disease on the newer treatments to prevent the chronic kidney disease from developing, such as the use of SGLT2 inhibitors in diabetes that clearly slow down the progression of chronic kidney disease and reduce cardiovascular mortality rates. Those drugs are really transforming the way we think about our approach to chronic kidney disease. Patients with chronic kidneys want to slow the progression to prevent complications. And then if patients develop end-stage kidney disease, decide if they should get treated for end-stage kidney disease with dialysis, transplantation, or whether they should be put into a conservative care pathway. And again, the conservative care pathway was very nicely discussed yesterday. And it's essential that we build that into our thinking about the management of end-stage kidney disease. So interventions to slow or prevent progression of kidney disease are absolutely essential. We need to develop effective, cost-efficient ways for the prevention and management of diabetes and vascular disease that can be integrated with other healthcare programs. So looking at working with endocrinology, working with cardiology to develop strategies to reduce the complication rate and slow the progression. And that is, again, absolutely essential now as we get better and better at reducing cardiovascular risk and reducing the progression of the diabetic-related kidney disease with these newer drugs that are being used now. Develop supportive care and comprehensive conservative care management programs to minimize the burden of serious health-related suffering. Transplantation, as I mentioned, is the best and cheapest way to manage expanding transplant programs. And then, in terms of dialysis, expanding PD programs. The outcomes are similar to HD. They should be more cost-effective. They are more cost-effective. You can get solutions at a reduced price, which we've already discussed, and you can do that here in Pakistan. It's a PD treatment program. Third thing is education and training. This is developing locally appropriate strategies to enhance the healthcare workforce capacity. First, you need to collect accurate information about the number, competence, knowledge, and distribution of the existing workforce. What's the role of technicians? What's the role of nurses? That was very nicely discussed yesterday. And worked in the integrated program which was had, and the talk that was just done next door just earlier this morning. We need to evaluate, though, the available education and training programs, perform a needs assessment by identifying the barriers and facilitating factors that inform the development of appropriate training modules and provide ongoing education for the workforce. And then estimate the workforce and educational needs to explore the expansion of end-stage kidney disease services. What role do technicians play? How can we expand their role? How do we expand the nurse's role to manage patients? And to do this, we need to think creatively about solving this problem. Telemedicine, training technicians, electronic training and support. So a couple examples of how this is happening, just to mention. One in Kenya now. Kenya decided to build dialysis units in every state in the country. There are 47 of them. 47 dialysis units are being built. There are about 8 nephrologists in the country. How are these going to be staffed? How are the people going to be trained to support them? So they're coming up with telemedicine support things that nephrologists in Nairobi can be supporting the operation of the dialysis units, which will be run by just general interns, for example, with a focus on telemedicine. Technicians will be trained. They're going to develop electronic training and support programs for these individual facilities. So this is a very interesting and clever way to expand the workforce using newer technologies. The refugee crisis in the Middle East is an interesting one. You know, if you follow what happened in Syria or Iraq, how is dialysis going to be provided? How are transplant patients going to be supported given the crisis that are going on in those countries? So there's some interesting work that was done by expatriate nephrologists working in Europe and working in the United States, where they were running dialysis units simply with technicians in the northern part of Syria, supported by telemedicine communication with physicians in Europe and the US. So you can use telemedicine very effectively. It's an interesting way to expand your workforce and provide, a reasonable level of care that can support patients in difficult times. But in countries where you have, and Pakistan will be one, where developing nephrologists all around the country is going to be impossible probably, and given the difficulties in traveling around Pakistan and the mountainous regions, thinking of using telemedicine creatively is a way to expand the workforce utilization and provide support. So financing and funding models. We need to develop strategies and funding models to ensure equitable and integrated end-stage renal disease care. Now, there are no guidelines you can provide for this, but each country or region within the country needs to select the amount of end-stage kidney disease funding as a proportion of the overall healthcare budget. How that should be done is challenging. In the US now, it's estimated that Medicare and CMS, which supports dialysis, 8% of Medicare, 8 or 9% of Medicare expenses go to support end-stage kidney disease, which is less than 1% of the Medicare-supported population. Is that right? Is that the way the money should be spent? Those are the issues that we need to talk about, because these issues are going to get more and more striking with time as the end-stage kidney disease population ages. There needs to be locally acceptable rationing criteria with transparent methods for their application, and these need to be developed. The general principles that are related to financing healthcare can be applied to dialysis, optimal use of resources, making the services available in equitable manner to all, and oversight of healthcare delivery. And I want to give you some examples, because to me this is really critically important. So in the United States, large dialysis organizations dominate care. 90% of care is provided by private companies that trade on the stock exchange. How do we make sure that these companies are providing adequate care and not increasing their profit margin but compromising care? You have to have essentially government regulation oversight, and that's what's happened in the US. But that is absolutely essential to have to build into the programs. Botswana and South Africa have developed these public-private partnerships to enable the expansion of care. In other words, the governments don't have the funding to build hemodialysis units. The hemo units are built by private companies, which then develop contracts with the government to provide care at predetermined fee structures. And that, most people feel in South Africa, has actually been an effective way to expand care. South Africa, though, has already also decided to provide funding for dialysis care only for those patients who are transplant candidates. If you're not a transplant candidate, the government will not pay for your care. Now, one can argue, is this reasonable, is it not reasonable? But it's not a completely unreasonable way to manage this. So people who are not transplant candidates are sent home to die, basically, because the government will not fund end-stage renal disease care. Nigeria is an example of probably the worst situation you can imagine. Here they have only private dialysis units with no government support. You can only get dialysis if you can pay for it. At the Nigerian nephrology meetings 2 years ago, they presented a slide showing the one-year mortality rate from dialysis is 99%. And it's 99% because people can only pay, they run out of money, they don't get any care, and they die. Physicians own the units, and it's a profit center for physicians. Does that make any sense? The answer is probably no. In Tanzania, the government has decided to provide support only for government employees. Once they made that decision, which was about 3 years ago, there was suddenly a marked expansion of private dialysis units developing in the country. And that's been good in a way because dialysis services have developed, but what about the non-government employees? And Kingo already mentioned their experience. So this obviously raises the question of ethics and why it's important to enunciate the ethical principles surrounding end-stage kidney disease care. And it's essential that this be done. If this has to be done, we have to take into account the equity, availability, and quality of care. And we have to clearly develop international statement articulating core ethical principles and values to guide policy and practice in end-stage kidney disease across varying economic backgrounds, and decide which types of policies make sense from an ethical point of view. And that's sort of summarized here. You need to take into account these various factors in promoting end-stage renal disease care from an ethical standpoint. And that really, to me, is really critically important as we move forward. Dialysis. It's important to define, recommend, apply, and develop a monitoring framework for minimum and optimal safety and quality standards for both PD and HD. So there are guidelines, in the United States, in the UK, in Europe, for example, Australia, that have been developed that set standards at a very high level. These need to be adapted depending on the economic resources of each country. What services are available, what medications are available. Is erythropoietin available, for example? Is intravenous iron available? So these need to be looked at within each country, and we need to look at the guidelines, but develop a standard of care which needs to be followed in the country and then needs to be implemented. And the implementation needs to either come from the government or from nephrology organizations to ensure that basic standards of care are met and maintained, whether it be water purification, dose of dialysis, safety precautions, infection controls, etc. So again, government and organizational oversight is essential. It's generally agreed that PD should be encouraged, PD first, because of simplicity and low cost. The value of incremental dialysis and trying to preserve residual kidney function has been a theme that's come up repeatedly at this meeting, and that's essential because it can reduce the cost. But there needs to be an ongoing assessment of outcomes and an evaluation of programs. A registry has to be developed. You need to look at outcomes, make comparisons from center to center, from region to region, to see what's going on. So let me give you an example. If you're talking about hemodialysis, do people need to be on dialysis 3 times a week? Is 2 times a week, which is the standard care I understand in Pakistan, is that acceptable? If patients are dialyzed 2 times a week, should the target be a KTD of 1.2 for each treatment? Should they be on dialysis for longer periods of time? That's a critical question, and there's no answer to that question. It really needs to be looked at. In PD, for example, we've discussed that if people have residual renal function, you can do incremental PD, 2 exchanges a day, 4-6 days a week, give patients 1, 2, or even 3 days off. And lastly is transplantation. Clearly, transplant is the cheapest and the best way to provide end-stage kidney disease care. Transplant programs need to be expanded, but there needs to be really oversight of how these transplantation programs are offered. And then you need to have first legislation for organ donation and safe transplantation in all countries. For example, in Russia, there were problems with using liver-related donors, where patients were accused, the government was accusing people of taking organs from patients' liver. Is it fair to sell organs for transplantation? The policy we see in Iran, for example, where the government regulates the donation of organs. And in Iran, there's no waiting list for transplant. Everyone who wants to get transplanted. Is that a policy that should be applied in other countries? Can there be an equitable? Those are the types of questions which we really need to answer. And lastly is conservative care. We've already talked about that, so I won't go into that any further. So again, it brings us back now to where we were in the beginning. What is the role the ISN should play, the ISPD should play, the Pakistan Society of Nephrology should play in looking at this issue? And I think the key here is to identify risk factors for chronic kidney disease and prevent it from developing. Once it develops, slow the progression, develop rational approaches to end-stage kidney disease. And again, develop an integrated model incorporating conservative care, transplantation, PD and HD, focusing on ethical issues, finances available, and clearly monitoring, tracking outcomes, and having clear oversight of the way end-stage kidney disease care is monitored by getting registries set up and having policies set by either government or by the Society of Nephrology